Previously on the Artful Planet, we learned about resistant materials like wax and oil that are hydrophobic, meaning they are afraid of water. Little hydrophobes afraid of just a little water. But what if there were materials on this planet that weren't afraid of water at all? In fact, some materials are the exact opposite. They love water so much that they will dissolve into water anytime they meet. I wonder if I could take some of these water-loving materials and turn them into some beautiful art experiments. I'm Gina Deere, and if you want to see some beautiful science in action, then stick around right here on the Artful Planet.
We have made the most important discovery in the history of our world.
So what is the opposite of hydrophobia? Well, it's hydrophilia. Hydro, we learned from last episode, means water. And philia is an old Greek word that means love. So chemists literally say that these materials love water. Now, you don't have to look very far to find two great examples of hydrophilic materials. No farther than your kitchen. That's right. Two of the most available hydrophilic materials that you can find are salt and sugar. Water just can't resist these two. Whenever they're around, water acts like a bunch of fans towards an internationally famous boy band. They just flock to it and they can't get enough of it. Here we have the humble potato, full of scrumdiddlyumptious starches and water. Even though this potato right here is solid, it is full of water, and all we need to do is find a way to draw this water out. This is where salt and sugar come in. So what we're going to do is we're going to chop up this potato, and we're going to put it in two separate bowls. Then, taking equal portions of salt and sugar, we're going to spread it all around and toss the potatoes in it. Salt and sugar are like someone who sings sweetly up to the balcony of the one they love, hoping that they'll come out and they can see them. And it works, because the second they start playing their music, the water comes out of the potato to mix and mingle with the salt and sugar. Now, I've already cubed up these potatoes, and on one I sprinkled sugar and tossed it in, and in another one I sprinkled salt and tossed it in. And I only waited about 20 to 30 minutes, and you can already see I start to pour this out, the water that's come straight out of the potatoes to join, to mix and mingle with the salt and sugar. So why is it so important that we know whether something is hydrophobic or hydrophilic? Well, medicines are made up of a wide variety of chemicals that are either hydrophobic or hydrophilic. And doctors and pharmacists need to know how these medicines will interact with the water inside your body. That's right, up to 60% of the human body is water. So it's important to know whether a chemical in a medicine is either going to love the water in your body or be afraid of it. Knowing which is which will give doctors and pharmacists the ability to give the right kind of medicine for the right kind of symptom. For example, the antibiotic gentamicin is hydrophilic, which means it's going to love hanging out inside of water. And it's very useful for fighting all kinds of scary bacteria that grow and live in your bloodstream. And medicines like steroids are hydrophobic, which means they would rather love hanging out with the oils and fats in your body. And this is good because it can help with things like muscle injuries and illnesses ranging from mild allergies to cancer. But how can we use this chemistry to help make some artful chemistry? Well, follow me and I'll show you. To get started, one of the things you're going to need is some watercolor paper. The next thing you're going to need is a paintbrush, some water, and some watercolors. Now, it doesn't have to be fancy. It can come from a dollar store or from a big box store, so don't worry if your watercolor doesn't look like mine. And most importantly, what you're going to need is some hydrophilic materials. I have with me 3 kinds of salt and 1 kind of sugar. I have some kosher salt. This is going to be more grainy. I have some sea salt, and you can tell it's already absorbed the moisture in the air because it's starting to clump together and get wet. And I have some Himalayan pink salt. It gets the color pink because not only does it have salt in it, but it has other minerals as well. And this sugar is simply raw, unprocessed sugar. As we begin, the first thing we're going to need is we're going to take our paintbrush and we're going to load it into the water to make sure that there's so much water in the paintbrush. Then, once the paintbrush is sufficiently filled with water, you're then going to dump that water on top of your paper, spreading it out all over because we want to make sure this paper is sufficiently wet before we apply any pigments from the watercolor. Now, once you've finished applying a good even coat of water all over your paper, you're then going to get your watercolor pigments wet and you're going to begin applying color. Now, I'm always partial to blue, but this time I'm going to mix it with a little bit of purple and see what kind of color I come up with. When you've got the color you want, go ahead and push it into your paper. The water that's already on your paper is going to help pull the pigments from the brush onto the paper. While the paper is still wet, you're going to want to start applying the salt. So let's start applying the kosher salt. Now you see, as soon as I sprinkle some salt in, you start to notice these little spots of darker color. That's because the salt is hydrophilic. It's pulling in the water everywhere around it. And with the water comes the pigments which are stuck in the water. Now let's try the sea salt. Because it's already clumped together, you're going to have bigger chunks of salt fall down onto the paper. But you see the same process happens. Where the salt goes, the water follows. Next, we're going to try the Himalayan sea salt. This is much coarser salt, so the individual grains are going to be much bigger. Let's see how that makes a difference on our painting. Last but not least, we're going to add our sugar. Now, I'm going to warn you ahead of time. Anytime sugar and water mix, you're going to get a really sticky, syrupy substance. So if you don't want a sticky mess, you can avoid this step altogether and just stick to the salt. But I'm showing you this because sugar is also hydrophilic. So you are beginning to see patches on this paper where the pigment's being pulled in and you see darker colors in spots and not in others. So have fun filling your paper with all sorts of colors, whatever you desire, and all sorts of salts, whatever you have in your home. Then when you're happy with the state of your artwork, all you have to do is give it time to dry, and then we're going to brush off the excess salt, and we're going to see what our artwork looks like. And once it's all dry, all you have to do is scrape off some of that extra salt, and you'll see this beautiful change in color between light pink, dark pink, medium pink. Who knew that this whole time what the artists were actually doing was being little chemists? I can't wait to see what kind of hydrophilic art you make. So let's do this. If you make and finish your painting, snap a picture of it and upload it to Instagram with the hashtag ArtfulPlanet for a chance to be featured on my next video. We learned so much about hydrophilic materials and how it can draw out the water of pretty much anything. We learned that our bodies are mostly water, and that doctors and pharmacists have to prescribe either hydrophobic or hydrophilic medicines depending on what ails you. Well, I'm so glad you stopped by, and I can't wait to see you again next week. Like and subscribe if you feel the same way too. Bye-bye now!